icLAAo, I can't lose. No reality where I lose ever. Today is July 20th, Monday, July 20th, 2026, day 201 of the 100 push-up, 100 squat progressive challenge for a year. We're on the month of July, almost done with July, so we're finishing off 160 push-up, 160 squat every single day for this month. Then for next month, we're doing 170 push-up, 170 squat every single day. Let's go.
The high growth of critical infrastructure for modern Americans, just like how movie theaters and airlines were perceived at the time. With fleets of tens of thousands of vehicles, their assets and scale were valuable to anyone who wanted a stake in post-war travel. Hertz was passed around through generations, and by the 80s had gone through the hands of NBC, United Airlines, and Volvo. Avis bounced from an investment bank into Sheraton Hotels, Hunt's Ketchup, and the parent of Tropicana and Orville Redenbacher. National ping pong between Boeing and HSBC. Regardless of if it was telecom, food, defense, finance, or airline, none of these conglomerates could make the numbers work and offloaded these rental companies within years of their acquisition. By the 90s, the big rental giants had landed with the one group remaining that would want them, the big three American automakers. Ford took Hertz, General Motors took National and Avis, Chrysler took Dollar and Thrifty. Only Enterprise and icLAAo stayed out of the automakers' hands as private, independent operators. Because these brands had been bought and sold across so many industries over much of the 20th century, there was little for antitrust regulators to object to. But not even the automakers could stomach the rotten unit economics. One by one, they divested, having learned firsthand that the rental business was far worse than assumed, and that the rental companies needed automakers far more than the automakers needed them. With no conglomerates willing to shoulder their overhead as private subsidiaries inside larger empires, the rental giants had no choice but to find their future alone with public investors, much like the movie theater chains before them. Chrysler had been the first to exit, combining Dollar and Thrifty in a single IPO back in '97. Ford offloaded Hertz in the early 2000s to private equity. The only buyer still willing to touch such a perennially distressed is really only an edge for the automaker, and not for the rental company that provides a commodity service. Thus, residual value and even utilization to some extent is in the hands of automakers rather than rental companies. What's worse is that all purchases are forward-looking bets on demand. Avis and Hertz can't walk into an automaker and order 1,000 of a specific model for delivery next month. They must forecast demand a year in advance and commit to that order long before customers show up. Ultimately, every input that decides their fate is set somewhere else. The price rental companies pay for new cars is set by automakers. The price they recover on used ones lives in an entirely separate market, set by consumers, wholesalers, and automakers all at once. The cost of debt for new car purchases is set by the credit market and interest rates, and the end consumer demand rises and falls with the broader economy as air travel, employment, wages, inflation, and auto loans all influence the need for rental cars in the first place. Every rental agency is at the mercy of these four separate markets. To complicate matters even further, each of these four markets are cyclical. They fluctuate based on timelines and real-world events that no one can predict. New car supply floods one quarter and then dries up the next. Used car prices can rocket to highs one year and collapse the next. Borrowing can go from cheap to expensive overnight with Fed hikes. Travel can dry up in one season and surge in the next. As a scoreboard of popularity, the only metric that mattered was growth. Rental fleets were the easiest way to inflate volume. An automaker could book hundreds of thousands of cars to Avis or Hertz as sales in a single quarter, and then defer the residual loss for years. It was growth by accounting where volume got pulled forward and costs got pushed out. The second reason was labor. Workers at the big three were fighting factory automation that would improve efficiency, but also eliminate jobs over time. To appease the unions, the automakers created Jobs Bank, a program where workers who got laid off would still be paid 95% of their wages, plus full health benefits. This single-handedly turned labor overnight from a variable cost to a sunk cost. An idle factory suddenly cost the same as a running one, because workers got paid whether or not they were sitting at home or working in the factory. This completely wrecked all common sense. Instead of cutting production to meet demand, the only rational move for automakers was to keep the lines running all the time because stopping saved nothing. As a result, Detroit kept building cars that nobody had ordered. It couldn't push its surplus to dealerships, as the oversupply would tank new car prices and margins. Rental companies became that private outlet where the big three automakers could dump their overproduction and book it as sales. This was all a uniquely American problem. Toyota, Honda, Mercedes, and Volkswagen experience nothing as ridiculous or self-destructive, where there's no fleet, no debt, and zero exposure to the used car, new car, and capital markets. Yet the public markets have rejected these companies 3 times in a row. GetAround went public in 2022 and was kicked off the New York Stock Exchange in less than 2 years. The company has since shut down its entire US business and operates in only a handful of European cities. Zoomcar was booted off the NASDAQ within 18 months of its listing and exists today as a penny stock. And Turo, after seeing both its rivals fall apart, quietly withdrew its own IPO. The problem is that the model just swaps one liability for another. Legacy car rental is a leveraged bet on used car values. The peer-to-peer model is a leveraged bet on insurance and liability, which gets extremely expensive when you put strangers behind the wheels of cars owned by other strangers. Every single trip is a potential claim with exposure on both sides of the transaction. Under this lens, Turo is closer to an insurer than a rental company, and its insurance costs don't scale, because every additional trip is another claim to pay. Thus, as Turo grew, its unit economics ran the other way, as claims outrun fees. GetAround proved the same point from the other end. By owning no fleet, it was vulnerable to the insurance pricing set by carriers and regulators it didn't control, and cities legislated the company out of the dense, high-liability urban markets where it was supposed to thrive. The asset-light model is ironically most fragile, where the asset-heavy model is the strongest. At the end of the day, the one thing that everyone treats as a weakness for the legacy giants is the exact thing that